They've stood at the front lines of law, leadership, and public service. From the courtroom to the classroom, Attorney Karen Jimeno brings sharp legal insight, academic excellence, and a voice that has guided national conversations. Attorney Mike Toledo, a seasoned public affairs strategist and legal mind with years in media, corporate leadership, and government reform. Together, they bring law to life with experience, integrity, and the courage to ask hard questions. Two minds shaped by the law. Two voices trusted in and out of the courtroom. This is ABOGADO.
Good evening and welcome to ABOGADO, where timely and controversial issues are laid bare through the lens of law, logic, and justice. I'm Attorney Mike Toledo.
And I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno. Tonight we confront legal crossroads that challenge both the law and the soul of the Filipino family: divorce.
The Philippines stands almost alone in the world for not having a divorce law. Is it the time to change that? Or would legalizing divorce chip away at the sanctity of marriage? Remember, partner, when we were studying law in law school a few years ago, you'd recall that we were asked to memorize Article 52 of then the family, persons and family. And I remember it was very clear. Marriage is not a mere contract, but an inviolable social institution. That's always been ingrained in my head.
Yes. And before we begin, let's take a closer look at the arguments on both sides. Here's the proposition we're debating tonight.
With annulment costly and separation ineffective, many remain trapped in unhappy marriages. Will legalizing divorce normalize separation or empower those who have no choice left? Will divorce destroy the Filipino family or give it a chance to heal? How do we reconcile divorce with our deeply held beliefs? Tonight, we weigh the law, the heart, and the soul of the Filipino family. The big question: should divorce be legalized in the Philippines?
Arguing for the affirmative, we have a well-known legal luminary, Justice Conchita Carpio-Morales, a former Associate Justice of the Supreme Court, and definitely one of the most respected voices in the legal community. Her impeccable career spans decades, including her transformative role as Ombudsman, where she became a symbol of integrity and accountability in government. With her profound understanding of both the Constitution and the complexities of social reform, Justice Carpio-Morales brings unparalleled expertise to the conversation on divorce.
And on the negative side, we welcome Attorney Joseph Peter J.P. Calleja, a distinguished constitutional law professor and an expert in the intricacies of Philippine law. A multi-awarded student and debater, Attorney Calleja is renowned for his deep understanding of the Constitution and its protection of societal values. His impressive career includes advocacy work that intersects with both legal theory and practical governance, making him the ideal legal voice to challenge the case for divorce.
Before we dive into a heated, and we expect it to be really heated, discussion, let's outline the structure of tonight's debate. Here's how we'll be navigating the conversation.
We'll begin with the opening statements. 1 minute and 30 seconds for the affirmative, followed by the negatives counter. Each side will present their constructive speeches on the first subtopic for 1 minute and 30 seconds each. Then, there will be a 3-minute interpolation, followed by 1 minute and 30 seconds for rebuttals from both sides. This process will repeat for the second and third subtopics. Once all subtopics are covered, both sides will give their closing statements, 1 minute and 30 seconds each. Finally, we'll wrap up with the host's questions, where the debaters will respond in 3 minutes.
Very measured, partner, no? Yung
Exactly,
rules natin.
partner. Yep.
Let's get started. The proposition for tonight's debate: should divorce be legalized in the Philippines? We'll begin with the affirmative side. Ombudsman Justice Conchita, you have 1 minute and 30 seconds to make your case.
All right. As I have earlier stated in a public discussion, I am for absolute divorce. To me, absolute divorce is the solution to the societal problems attendant to dysfunctional marriages and dysfunctional families that result from it. Thus, it's the state's obligation to carry out its mandate to protect the welfare of the people by legislating a law on absolute divorce. And it breaks my heart to know that some legislators are not for absolute divorce, despite the fact that we know for a fact that some are infidel and therefore are not true to their opposition against absolute divorce. Thank you.
Very well said.
That was a very strong opening statement, if I may say so. So now let's hear from the negative side. Atty. Calleja, you also have 1 minute and 30 seconds.
Good evening, dear viewers and friends. Divorce should not be legalized because it is against the Constitution. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Tonight's discussion is not just about the benefits, the practicality, or the necessity of having an absolute divorce law. But more importantly, as lawyers, as members of the legal community, the first question that we must answer is, does an absolute divorce bill violate the Constitution? And the answer to that question is yes. Article 2, Section 15 of the Constitution provides that marriage as an inviolable social institution is the foundation of the family and shall be protected by the state. No other than the people themselves, the members of the Constitutional Convention that ratified the 1987 Constitution, made that protection in order to safeguard the sanctity of marriage as an institution. Thank you and good evening.
Okay. Another good opening statement.
Indeed.
As we begin our first subtopic, we look at the deeper effects of divorce on families. How might legalizing divorce impact the lives of individuals and the broader family structure? Ombudsman Justice Carpio-Morales, we now turn to you for your constructive speech on this matter, on how divorce affects individuals and the broader family structure.
All right. Marriage is, as they say, an inviolable social institution and the foundation of the family, which the state is duty-bound to protect. But the state is supposed to be aware that this inviolable constitution is founded on the concept that a marriage is blissful, is happy, and is in harmony with your wife, with your husband, with your children, and with the community in which you live in. Unfortunately, this is not the case in some, if not most, cases of marital discords. You see, the Constitution, while it says that that family is or marriage is supposed to be an inviolable constitution, it is mandated also to protect the welfare of the people. First, let's interpret a particular provision of the Constitution, set it apart from the rest of the provisions. When we construe a certain provision, we should consider the other provisions of the Constitution so that there will be harmony, so that there will be no inconsistency, so that there should be no discord. Thus, we should not construe a constitutional provision in its literal sense, but it should be construed in a sense, in a modified sense, so that we can harmonize the entire provisions of the Constitution. Now,
I think we're out of time, Ombudsman, but
okay.
I think
It's
you
okay.
made a point
Okay.
on that subtopic.
all right.
And you will have time for interpolations.
Okay. I was not looking at the timer.
Yes.
I was
That's
not aware
okay.
of the timer.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you very much, Ombudsman Justice. Now, let's hear the negative side's position. Your constructive speech on this subtopic, Atty. Calleja.
I am very glad indeed that Justice Morales brought up that constitutional construction, which is the Constitution should be interpreted as a whole. And in fact, there is a ruling case on that matter. The Supreme Court, in the case of Francisco versus
That's my ponencia.
House of Representatives.
This is what's great when you have a justice. Sorry, I'm not
That's
going to
right.
take from your time. I will give it back to you, but go ahead. Yes.
The court, speaking through the wisdom of Justice Morales, said that the first rule in constitutional construction is actually verba legis, or the plain meaning rule. And the second is ratio est anima. Only when there is ambiguity should constitutional construction resort to the soul or the interpretation. And the last method is the Constitution should be interpreted as a whole. Now, if we go back to the wording of Section 2, Article 15 of the Constitution, marriage as an inviolable social institution is the foundation of the family and shall be protected by the state. The first method of constitutional construction should be used, and that is verba legis, or the plain meaning rule. So although I agree that one of the methods of constitutional construction is ut magis valeat quam pereat, which is the Constitution should be interpreted as a whole, the court, the jurisprudence right now is, first of all, we must do so using the verba legis, or the plain meaning rule. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Attorney J.P. Calleja. We now proceed to interpolation. Each side may take turns asking questions within the total 3-minute period that we'll have for this. As your hosts and moderators, Attorney Mike and I will ensure fairness and time discipline throughout this exchange. Who would like to begin? Perhaps Ombudsman? Because
Can you cite instances which can be called irreparable marriages?
Yes.
That can be repaired.
That can be repaired.
Because they're supposed to be irreparable, but they can be repaired if you are not for absolute divorce.
Yes. There's a question on loyalty of male, but this is sometimes this can be repaired actually. But the question of the good justice is if I can cite an example of an irreparable
Divorce, irreparable situation that can be repaired.
That can be repaired.
Yes.
So
It's irreparable and yet it can be repaired.
violence is one. I think it can be repaired.
All right. How do you repair violence?
If the person goes into therapy, anger management, and the couple can undergo therapy sessions as well, then this can be repaired. But we don't go into an absolute breaking of the marital tie. I mean, the marriage needs to be successful. It needs to be worked out by the parties. And whatever problems that they have must be repaired, must be done by both members of or by both spouses.
Suppose the violence is staccato. It is it is committed repeatedly. Should also the couple go through repeated tests or consultations with experts?
Thank you for that question, Madam Justice. There are laws in place to address that problem. You have the VAUSI, Anti-Violence Against Women and Their Children's Act. You have the provisions of the revised penal code that can address the violence in marriage, but we don't go into breaking the marital bond. We don't go to divorce for that.
Attorney Calleja, perhaps you have a question for the justice.
Yes.
I feel like I'm sitting and listening to a hearing
Yeah.
when Justice was asking Attorney Calleja.
I know.
So
Yeah.
perhaps it's your turn to ask the question.
I'm just wondering how the good justice will react to studies that because of the changing family structure, just like divorce in the United States, it turns out that adolescent depression and suicide are closely linked with divorce and single parenting.
Well, it's not the monopoly of the United States. It's prevalent everywhere. But these statistics can lie. America may have that kind of statistics, but not in Japan. Of course, there's a lot of suicides in Japan, but not because of marital discord or divorces. But that is not unusual. So that should not be a good ground to repel or to stop the grant of divorce.
And we have 4 seconds left for the interpolation. So those are great questions. Because
Indeed.
I think on both sides, they raise good points. And I'm so used to interviewing that I have questions myself. I have to stop myself. But with the irreparable issues, homosexuality is one, and sometimes it's realized in the middle of the marriage, but currently it's not a ground for dissolving a marriage.
But I think in the pending bill, that's one of the expanded grounds.
Yeah.
Also, sex changes and all that.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. We want to really plunge into the discussion as well. But of course, we still have to listen to the rebuttals.
Yes.
And now we go to the rebuttals. Each side will have 1.5 minutes to respond, challenge key points, and further clarify their arguments. Now, let's begin with the affirmative side. Justice?
What arguments am I supposed to clarify?
Suppose I think whatever is
Whatever was raised
something
earlier,
that Attorney JP raised
Yes.
that you think
Yes.
has not been addressed yet.
All right.
We have to expound on it.
All right. There have been instances that, so many instances that the offending spouse forgets his responsibility as a father or as a mother. There have been sex changes.
Yes.
You know, that, that deters procreation, which is in the first place one of the purposes of marriage, to create children. There have been instances where the spouse cohabits with another who is not his spouse. These are instances where the state should come in. The state should protect the welfare of the people, and again, back to my argument, and should therefore be a strong argument for the grant of absolute divorce.
Your rebuttal, Attorney Calleja.
Yes. In law school, we are taught that application is the rule and construction is the exception. So all we need to do is to go back to the wording of the Constitution under Section 2, Article 15 of the Constitution, which defines marriage as an inviolable social institution and shall be protected by the state. So in the wordings of the Constitution, there are two safeguards that were provided by the framers. First is the word inviolable, and second are the words shall be protected by the state. There's nothing technical there, so there's only room for application. There's no room for construction, and therefore, marriage should not be passed because it is unconstitutional.
Okay, you mean divorce of
Divorce of
marriages.
marriage.
Okay.
Now we go next to analyze the potential and legal social effects of legalizing divorce. What challenges could arise in the legal system, and how might this affect our social norms? Now let's explore both sides, beginning with Justice Carpio-Morales' constructive speech on this topic.
All right. The potential legal effects of divorce is that, you give financial stability to the offending spouse because the offended spouse, because the offending spouse may have neglected his or her responsibility to his spouse, to their children, and to others who are mandated to be cared for by the couple. Again, financial and custody matters will be settled. Such settlement is one of the legal effects of the grant of divorce. Then also, of course, the division of conjugal property would be settled, the payment of debts incurred during the marriage, as well as the use of the name, marital or maiden name of the wife, if in case the wife is the offended spouse. Now, you were asking for social effects also of marriage, is that you would free the offended couple, the offended wife, from the pain, the anger, the hostility, the depression attendant to the irreparable marriage that offended spouse is going through. And of course, it takes time before probably the divorce effects will be felt. But given the resilience of the Filipinos, it will come a time when you will be able to absorb the social effects of divorce.
Thank you so much, Ombudsman Justice Conchita. Attorney JP Calleja, your turn.
Yes, thank you. The arguments of Justice Carpio-Morales focused on the benefits on the spouse. But let's go back to the definition of marriage. It is the foundation of the family precisely because the children are also at stake. The future of the children are also at stake. And therefore, marriage is not only about spouses. It's not only about freeing one spouse from the bondage of marriage, but it's also about the future of the children. And to borrow Dean Jemoy Gatdula's words in his article, millennials seem to be afraid of commitment nowadays precisely because of divorce. So there's a study that links this culture among millennials of seemingly afraid of commitment because of divorce, because they can cancel out anyway. They can go back to their original status as single individuals. And so no one wants to commit. No one wants to have a lifelong commitment, and that is marriage. So what we have is a society that is whose members are afraid to commit, whose members are afraid to be hurt, whose members are afraid to be frustrated. And that is the kind of culture that divorce will promote if this divorce bill will be passed. So marriage is an inviolable social institution. It is the foundation of the family, because the reason for that is we want to build a strong society, a society whose members are not afraid to surrender against all odds. We have laws to address the present problems in marriages. Thank you.
Thank you, Atty. Calleja. Now let's move to interpolation. You have 3 minutes to engage each other directly. Anyone who wishes to begin may proceed. Maybe this time, let's start with you, Atty. Calleja.
Specifically on this subtopic too, the effects on the social structure.
Of legalizing
Yes,
divorce.
I have been listening to the arguments of the good justice, and so far the arguments are more couple-centered. So how about good arguments for divorce that are also children-centered?
To begin with, divorce would, in the first place, affect the couples. The effect on the children would come later if divorce is granted. Now, even children now who see their parents who are in the verge of quarreling almost every day are even the ones who advise their parents, why don't they just separate? Why don't they just ask for divorce? They are aware of the father who is philandering and neglects to carry out his responsibilities. So the children themselves are the ones who are asking their parents to secure divorce. So why do you say that the children would not be considered in the first place when you talk of divorce?
Can I answer?
Yes, of course.
Please,
the question?
please.
I admit
We still
that
have time.
I admit that there are some instances wherein the children would be the one to suggest that their parents should have divorce. But these are children. These are 18 years old and below 18 years old. So firstly, they really don't know what views they are espousing. But more than that, I've handled several cases of broken marriages, and it's so unfair for children to choose which side they should be. For example, if the mother and father are quarreling and they are separating, much more if they are going to have divorce, and a daughter or a son will choose which side should he or she go to. That's very difficult, and it's so unfair for children. And it's even traumatic because there will be, of course, if children are in school and there are some family events, it's so unfair for children to be seeing their classmates with parents, and they are alone in school.
Mm-hmm. Any other question, Ombudsman Justice?
Well, if you factor in the feelings of children who are the children of prospective divorcees, we will never, ever, under any circumstance in the Philippines, consider the grant of divorce.
And I commend Justice Morales for saying that, because that means that it merely affirms that the state should really take care of those who cannot defend themselves, and that's through the doctrine of parens patriae, wherein the state takes care of those who cannot defend themselves, such as children. And therefore, right now, the divorce bill should not be passed because it is not pro the future of these children.
Precisely, the Constitution directs the state to promote the general welfare of everybody, and therefore, if the state is not carrying out its obligation to protect the welfare of people, then it allows the destruction of marriage, it allows the suffering of the offended spouse, it allows the violence, physical and emotional, being committed against the suffering spouse.
Okay. Since we finished the time on interpolation and Ombudsman Justice Carpio raised a point related to the social effects of divorce or not allowing it, I would count that as part of your rebuttal statement, which is the next phase that we're entering right now, where you have 1 minute and 30 seconds, but you have not exhausted that time. So if you want to add a point, Ombudsman, to that point that you raised with respect to keeping the couple in the marriage because of parents patriae, meaning you're only looking out for the welfare of the children but not the parents or couple themselves. Do you want to add any point in this rebuttal?
Well, there should be a balance. You protect the spouses, you protect the children, you protect the dignity of the human being. And it is in that context that the state should come in to weigh which is good for the benefit of everybody.
Okay.
Attorney Calleja, your rebuttal.
You have 1 minute, 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Thank you. The rebuttal to that statement are no other than facts, because there are studies that there's a comparison between kids that were raised in intact homes versus kids who experienced their parents' divorce. And according to the studies, these kids whose parents are divorced are more promiscuous. They have the tendency to cohabit with other kids, and there is no guidance coming from both mother and father, because the society is designed that the family should be or children should be raised by both the mother and the father, and divorce precisely destroys that balance between having a child raised by male and female by the couple themselves. So there are studies on that. So although I commend Justice Morales for her views on the rights of couples to unmarry, but as far, again, during the deliberations when the wordings on marriage was passed, and if I will also argue based on the reconciliation of the Constitution and the Family Code, the more that marriage will not be passed as constitutional, because marriage is for the foundation of the family. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Attorney Calleja, partner. This has been really engaging, lively, heated, and I've never heard so many Latin words in a while.
Yes, that's true. But I really appreciate this discussion, this discourse, because there are good points on both sides.
Exactly. So we'll pause briefly, but when we return, we'll explore the ethical and moral dimensions of the issue, with particular attention to cultural and religious beliefs. You're watching Abogado. Don't touch that clicker. Stay with us.
You're still watching Abogado. Tonight's debate proposition: should divorce be legalized in the Philippines? Taking the affirmative side is Supreme Court Justice and Ombudsman Conchita Carpio-Morales, while Attorney J.P. Calleja stands on the negative.
Now we reach our last subtopic. In a society deeply rooted in tradition and faith, how do we balance legal progress with moral conviction? Let's hear from our debaters, beginning with your constructive speech. Justice, Ombudsman?
Well, we're talking about ethics,
Yes.
all right, and moral considerations. Ethics is supposed to be a standard of behavior. In this country, anything affecting marriage under existing laws are arrived at with a consideration of family-oriented values and a religion, of course. And that's probably the reason why we are the only country in the world, except the Vatican and Rome, which does not have absolute divorce. The family-oriented values of Filipinos, however, do not rule out any deleterious situations within the family that affect the sanctity of marriage or cause disharmony and trouble destruction of the marriage bonds and family ties. Another reason, of course, why we're so slow in trying to talk about divorce is our beliefs, which are anchored on religion. But let me say that there is no equal protection of the law in the Philippines because they allow divorce in the Muslim areas because they believe that Islam allows so, whereas the Catholics, which are predominant in number in the Philippines, are not allowed. So there's a violation of the equal protection of the law clause.
Yeah.
Attorney Calleja, your 1 minute and 30-second constructive speech on the ethical and moral considerations.
So maybe it's okay to mention some justifications, especially by some civilists, on the constitutionality of a divorce bill by citing the late Jesuit Father Joaquin Bernas, who purportedly said to Human Rights Commissioner Chito Gascon that it is not that it is allowed, it is not, or it is possible for Congress to legislate an absolute divorce law. But this is invoking, again, the intention rule only when there is ambiguity involved. As far as the Constitution is concerned, this particular Commissioner Gascon and Father Bernas exchange should not be looked into because at the time that when Father Bernas interpolated Father Gascon, the word inviolable was not yet inserted in the Constitution. So in fact, the following day, Commissioner Maambong already inserted the word inviolable, and that was the time when the framers of the Constitution voted on that particular provision. So what is controlling is not the opinion of Father Bernas. What is controlling is, in fact, the text that was ratified, that was voted upon by the people on that very same date when the word inviolable was already inserted in the provision of the Constitution. The Philippines is still a Catholic country. And as Catholics, there are some views that many will say conservative, but in our position, these are not just conservative views, these are also constitutional views. As long as there's a constitution, marriage should be protected as an institution.
Okay, just in time, because we're out of time for the opening statements for this subtopic, but there's an interpolation, and there's a total of 3 minutes for each side to ask questions.
Well, is it not that portion you mentioned about Father Bernas asking Chito Gascon to justify your theory that that portion shows that divorce was not within the context of the Constitutional Convention proceedings? But even the Supreme Court quoted that to indicate that indeed divorce is not ruled out ultimately. Is it that was quoted by the Supreme Court?
It was quoted by the Supreme Court, but that was not the lis mota of the case.
That was not the lis mota, but even if it's not the lis mota, it indicates that the Supreme Court did not rule out the adoption of divorce or the grant of divorce in the country.
Yes. However, this Gascon-Bernas exchange happened on September 24, 1986. That was the time when Father Bernas was asked by Commissioner Gascon whether the intention of the framers was to totally ban absolute divorce, and Father Bernas said no. However, the following day, September 25, 1986, Mr. Maambong, Commissioner Maambong, already added the word inviolable in that definition of marriage in the Constitution. And Father Bernas was there, and he did not oppose. And in fact, it was a unanimous vote. It was the definition on marriage that was adopted by the framers of the Constitution. And as far as the Constitution is concerned, that was the point wherein the people of the Philippines ratified the provision on marriage as an inviolable social institution and shall be protected by the state. And take note, marriage. It did not distinguish whether it's a broken marriage or a successful marriage. It simply says marriage shall be protected by the state. And that definition on marriage is still standing up to this very point.
We still have a minute. Do you have a question, Attorney Calleja, for Ombudsman Justice Carpio-Morales?
How do we protect those spouses who may fall into the trap of getting a divorce, but actually they can still save the marriage? Don't you think that divorce is an easy solution for marriages that can still be saved?
Well, if it's already irreparable and it is beyond help or beyond salvaging it, why do we still have to think of whether we can still save it? But even the church indicates that it can allow civil divorce. Remember in the Catechism, it says that if civil separation, if civil divorce is the only way by which we can give protection and care to the spouses as well as the children and protect them from inheritance issues, then to have civil separation, to grant civil separation is tolerated and is not a moral offense.
Thank you so much, Justice. Yeah, in fact, civil divorce is recognized in church to a certain extent, if I recall correctly, but it will not allow you to remarry.
Yes.
I think that's the difference. Now, we now proceed to the rebuttals. So, Justice Carpio-Morales, your rebuttal, please, and you have 1 minute and 30 seconds.
Rebuttal.
For whatever issue you think is relevant for this subtopic of ethical and moral
I still maintain that absolute divorce should be granted because given the sufferings of mostly battered wives, because there are a few instances also battered husbands, how can we extricate them from the world of pain, from the world of agony, from the world of distress, if we allow them to continuously suffer and be living in misery, despite the fact that they could have other recourses, including divorce, to be granted by the courts. Of course, divorce can only be granted by the courts. But to say that it is not in conformity with the constitutional provision that marriage is an inviolable social institution is, to me, unacceptable. Because, as I said, we should also consider harmonizing all the provisions of the Constitution and not taking one part or segregating one part alone and interpreting it without consideration of the other provisions as a whole.
Attorney Calleja, your rebuttal, you have 1 minute and 30 seconds.
Since this is a legal debate, so the constitutionality of any legislation on divorce, this rests on concern of legality or constitutionality. It is important that the risks far outweigh the benefits of absolute divorce, as it should be emphasized that despite all of the sensationalized claim of escaping from alleged violent relationships and marriages, majority of Filipinos would choose to preserve the family above all else. And such importance is emphasized in Article 15 of the Constitution, Section 2 of the Constitution. We are against the present divorce bill because it espouses or cheapens marriage by allowing summary procedure. So those law students, those lawyers, please, I invite you to read the bill. It allows the rules on summary procedure. So for us, this cheapens marriage. And not to mention the disadvantages that a divorce bill will give to not only to the spouses but to the children themselves, who are in fact the ultimate victims of separation and divorce. Thank you.
Can I say something?
We have a closing
Well,
statement for
yeah,
that.
so perfect. Yeah, I think that would fit into the closing statement.
Very good statement indeed that both of you have delivered. So we are now going to wrap up this debate. And in this portion of the program, each side will be allowed to deliver a 1-minute 30-second closing statement. So now we begin with the affirmative side.
Congress has initiated the enactment of a divorce law under the Comprehensive House Bill number 9349. Attorney Calleja laments the fact that the procedure could be summary and therefore it would not be fair for the parties. But this still can be amended, and in fact, as far as procedure is concerned, the Supreme Court can the Supreme Court can pass rules and procedures that can control the conduct of divorce proceedings. So to say that the present bill on divorce is not fair because it calls for summary procedure is not final, because it can still be amended, and as I said, the Supreme Court can enact laws respecting procedure in the conduct of divorce proceedings.
Attorney Calleja, your closing statement.
Well, I do not wish to remind the good justice of what the Supreme Court wrote in Francisco versus House of Representatives, because she is the ponente of that particular case. But in that case, it is very symbolic that the court said that we look to the language of the document or the bill itself in our search for its meaning. We do not, of course, stop there, but that is where we begin. It is to be assumed that the words in which constitutional provisions are couched express the objective sought to be attained. Now, going back to the wordings of the Constitution, it's clear that the framers prohibit an absolute divorce bill because it undermines the family and it destroys the family, because the word inviolable means to hold sacred, to protect, sacrosanct, and not to pass a bill that will anyway destroy the marital bond between the spouses.
Thank you very much.
Again, very well argued on both sides.
I know.
This is so difficult.
So later on, we'll have a hard time.
Attorney Mike, we're allowed to ask one question, but because
Yes.
dapat tig-isa tayo,
Yeah, I
but
know,
because
I
we're
know.
out of time, we're allowed to ask one. But with your permission, I want to
Please.
raise a question
Yes.
because
Yeah.
we have been arguing about divorce, but we haven't discussed the only alternative that's allowed for under the law, Article 36 of the Family Code, which only allows annulment and only on one ground, which is psychological incapacity
Yeah.
at the time of the marriage.
Yeah.
So my question is, or our final question is, what would be the implications of the status quo? Meaning, currently, is there a risk that Article 36, psychological incapacity through annulment, can be used as a means of divorce under the current state of our law?
Well, can
Yes,
I
you can
please.
speak
Yeah.
first, and then we can
Yeah.
end with
I think
Ombudsman.
the Supreme Court understands this. In fact, there is already a recent case penned by Supreme Court Associate Justice Leonen, wherein he defined psychological incapacity not as a medical concept, and there's no need to present as evidence an expert testimony. So there is a relaxation of what psychological incapacity is. And I think this is a way for the Supreme Court or for the law itself to adapt to the changing times. So do you need an absolute divorce bill for that? No. What you need is an application of recent Supreme Court decisions, which are also law of the land. Thank you.
Thank you. Ombudsman Justice Conchita.
Oh yes, it is not a medical concept, it is a legal concept. And therefore, when you say it's a legal concept, you have to look at the circumstances surrounding the alleged physical, psychological incapacity, because now even doctors are no longer allowed to testify to the incapacity of any spouse. But then again, because it's a legal concept, it can be interpreted under the prevailing circumstances at the time any incapacity is committed.
A lot of subjectivity. No?
Exactly. And you know, this is really an issue at the heart of the national conversation on the law, on family, and of faith. That's why we ran out of time. I really wanted to even ask, is it really true, the argument that not having a divorce law is anti-poor? But unfortunately, we ran out of time, and that was a very thought-provoking exchange. And Attorney Karen, very quickly, what point resonated with you most tonight?
There were two. So one is from Attorney Calleja's side, because it's the first time that I started thinking, is it really unconstitutional if we passed a divorce law because of the word inviolable marriage in our Constitution? But from the side of Ombudsman Justice Conchita, something that really resonated with me is, how do you repair an irreparable circumstance? So if you have, for example, someone in the marriage, and this doesn't just apply to females, but both males and females, where the other spouse has realized that I am not male or female after all, I am LGBTQ, then are you forcing the couple to be stuck in the marriage? Yes. So those are the two things that stand out for me the most.
What resonated with me is the fact that with both the arguments presented, the rebuttals and the interpolations and the answer to the questions that were being propounded to each other, ay ang una talagang pumasok sa isip ko ay talagang siguro talagang maganda na pinagdidebatihan natin ngayon ito dahil we can see na nagkakaroon ng konting change sa arguments, nagkakaroon ng konting change sa public opinion. There's really a shift towards accepting the possibility of an absolute divorce bill. As to whether or not it will pass into law is another question. But all I'm just trying to say, there is some change already going on. Perhaps it started because of the passage of the reproductive bill a few years back. So maybe this is something that we should be really watching for and looking forward for in the near future.
I agree, partner. And to our esteemed guests, again, Ombudsman Justice Conchita Carpio-Morales and Attorney J.P. Calleja, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your deep wisdom with us. And to our viewers, thank you for taking part in this critical discussion.
And whether you're for or against divorce, one thing is clear. Filipinos deserve a well-informed debate on the issue, just like tonight.
Stay tuned for our next episode, where we tackle a pressing question. Should Vice President Sara Duterte be impeached? We'll be joined by legal experts and voices from the ground to unpack the legal and political implications.
So until then, stay informed, stay engaged, and always stay curious. This is
ABOGADO.
Good
Good
night.
night.